Today, we're diving into the incredible story of a ruler who inherited a crumbling empire and completely turned it around. We're talking invasion, bankruptcy, and opposition at every single turn. This is the amazing story of Maria Theresa.
Seriously, just picture it. You're 23 years old, and overnight you are in charge of this massive, sprawling empire. But here's the catch. Pretty much every other powerful leader in Europe is dead set against you. They don't think you have any right to be there, and they are more than ready to start carving up your territory for themselves. Well, that's the exact crisis Maria Theresa woke up to on her very first day as empress.
She didn't have a choice. She had to step up. But the empire she was now leading was a complete mess. The treasury, practically empty. The army, a joke, totally disorganized. And her rivals were already on the move, marching across her borders because they saw her as an easy target. It was the ultimate trial by fire.
So you might be wondering, how did she even get the throne in the first place? Well, her father, the emperor, didn't have any sons, so he spent years getting all the big players in Europe to sign this special law called the Pragmatic Sanction, which basically said, yep, my daughter can rule. But the second he died, poof, all those promises just vanished into thin air. And this betrayal wasn't just some political drama. It meant one thing and one thing only: immediate, all-out war.
Okay, you really have to see this comparison because it shows just how bad things were. On one side, you've got Maria Theresa with no money and a weak, poorly trained army. On the other side, you've got this brilliant and totally ruthless king, Frederick II of Prussia. And what does he do? He immediately invades Silesia, which was one of her richest provinces. That single move kicks off the War of the Austrian Succession.
And this wasn't some quick little battle. We're talking about an 8-year-long struggle for her empire's very existence. This brutal, drawn-out war taught her a lesson she would never, ever forget. If her empire was going to survive, it had to change, fundamentally.
So, after barely surviving that war and losing Silesia, Maria Theresa realized she couldn't just keep reacting to crises. That wasn't a winning strategy. She had to get ahead of the game. So she launched this mission to rebuild her empire from the ground up and create a truly modern nation.
And what's the first thing she goes after? The military. The old way of doing things, just hiring soldiers when a war breaks out, was a total disaster. It's exactly why she was so unprepared for Frederick's surprise attack.
So her solution was a complete game changer. She created a professional fighting force. First, a permanent standing army that was always ready to go. Second, a military academy to train officers who actually knew what they were doing. Third, standardized uniforms, drills, and gear for everyone. And maybe most importantly, she made sure the soldiers got paid and fed regularly. This wasn't just about getting more troops, it was about building a modern military machine from scratch.
Of course, a modern army costs a lot of money, and the empire was flat broke. The biggest problem was that the wealthiest people, the nobles and the church, paid almost zero taxes. Can you believe that? All the wealth was concentrated at the top, and the state was getting none of it.
Her solution here was honestly revolutionary. She did the unthinkable. She forced the nobility and the clergy to start paying taxes. And to make sure it was fair, she ordered a massive survey of all the land and property. Then, she created a central government in Vienna with new departments to manage the economy and trade. She basically turned a loose collection of territories into one unified economic powerhouse.
But Maria Theresa was smart. She knew a modern state wasn't just about having a strong army and a full treasury. It was about the people. So she launched a whole new set of reforms that improved the lives of everyday citizens in ways no ruler had really done before.
She looked around and saw a huge weakness. Most of her people couldn't read or write. I mean, how are you supposed to run a modern country if your citizens aren't educated? She knew this had to change.
So in 1774, she did something absolutely incredible. She made a new law that required every single child, boy or girl, between the ages of 6 and 12 to go to school. This was one of the very first state-run public education systems anywhere in the world, a total game changer.
And her reforms didn't stop at the classroom, they went right down to the farms. Before she came along, peasants were basically serfs, forced to do tons of unpaid labor for their landlords. She passed laws that put a legal limit on that forced labor. She also modernized farming, encouraging new crops like the potato to help prevent famines. A stable food supply and a freer workforce, that's the foundation of a stable country.
There was another massive threat hanging over her people: disease.
Smallpox was a constant terror, killing countless people, especially children. It was a public health crisis. So she tackled this problem head-on, with science. She poured money into the University of Vienna, turning it into a world-class medical school. She built new hospitals. But here's the most amazing part. She championed inoculation, which was a very early form of vaccination. People were terrified of it, so to prove it was safe, she had her own children inoculated first. What an incredible act of leadership. So when you put it all together, the military, the financial system, the education, the public health, you start to see the whole picture. Maria Theresa wasn't just ruling an empire, she was building a brand new one.
And here's something that just blows my mind. While doing all of this, she was also the mother of 16 children. And for her, that role was both deeply personal and intensely political.
She used her children's marriages to build powerful alliances all over Europe. It was like a giant game of chess. Her most famous daughter, Marie Antoinette, of course, became the Queen of France, and her oldest son, Joseph, would eventually rule alongside her and continue her modernizing reforms. For her, family and state were one and the same.
So let's just quickly recap her incredible 40-year reign. It starts in 1740 with that desperate fight for survival. It's tested again by another massive war, the 7 Years' War, but in the end, it's defined by these transformative changes like that 1774 schooling law that reshaped her entire society.
When all is said and done, it's really hard to argue with this. Maria Theresa inherited this fragile, medieval collection of lands that was on the verge of total collapse, and she left behind a centralized, powerful, modern empire that was ready for the future.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. When you look at her biggest ideas, a professional army for defense, public schools for the people, and a fair tax system to pay for it all, which of those three pillars do you think is the most important for a country to succeed today? It's a really interesting question, and it just goes to show how relevant her legacy still is.